Right now, if you look at the corporate landscape, there is just this absolute scramble to buy the latest AI tools.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
Like a total gold rush. I mean, companies are treating it like this magical key to, infinite productivity and blistering speed.
Right. Just plug it in and watch the profits soar.
Exactly. But there's a glaring paradox at the heart of this whole rush.
Yeah.
Because organizations are spending millions to adopt these tools, yet many of them are actually degrading their internal capacity to make good decisions.
It's a huge problem.
It really is. And it raises a massive question for you to consider as we get into this today.
Okay.
Let's unpack this. What if the way we're adopting AI right now is quietly building a thin layer of artificial productivity over basically incredibly fragile human judgment?
What's fascinating here is that this is a critical vulnerability, and it really stems from a very basic categorization error.
How so?
Well, a lot of leadership teams are treating generative AI the same way they treated, the shift to cloud computing or rolling out a new enterprise resource planning system.
Like it's just another tech upgrade.
Exactly. They assume it's just a software update. But integrating a completely new cognitive engine into your daily operations, that requires a fundamental rewiring of how your organization actually learns.
Which brings us directly to the core of today's deep dive. We're drawing from this incredible source material, the Learning Organization Playbook.
It's a fantastic document.
It really is. It was prepared for Me There by Design and the Learning AI Institute. And what makes this playbook stand out so much is that it synthesizes 5 major academic streams into a really practical operating model.
Yeah, it bridges the theory and the practice.
Right. So our mission today is to decode the difference between simply buying AI and actually becoming what they call AI ready. Because the playbook argues that winning long term, it basically has almost nothing to do with which specific software platform you select.
Because the software will inevitably change. The large language model you subscribe to today, it might be completely I-classed by a competitor in 6 months.
Oh, easily. The landscape changes weekly.
Right. So the organizations that actually thrive will be the ones that build resilient human systems. We're talking shared language, rigorous judgment, feedback loops, things that persist no matter what technology is sitting underneath them.
That makes a lot of sense.
But to understand where companies go wrong, we really have to look at the trap of the standard software rollout.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Usually a company picks a vendor, mandates a quick training seminar on navigating the interface.
Right, the classic click here to start webinar.
Exactly. They publish an acceptable use policy and then just consider the job done. With traditional software, that creates durable capability. But with AI, it merely creates a flurry of activity.
Just people pressing buttons.
Yeah.
I really want to break down why that activity doesn't translate to capability, because the playbook leans heavily on the work of system scientist Peter Senge here.
Yes, his concept of the 5 disciplines.
Right. Senge differentiates between adaptive learning and generative learning. And this is key. So adaptive learning is purely reactive. Like a competitor drops their prices, so you adopt a new pricing algorithm just to keep up.
You're just adapting to survive.
Exactly. But generative learning, on the other hand, is about continually expanding your organization's capacity to create an entirely new future. It's proactive. It's foundational.
And that distinction perfectly highlights the current deficit in AI adoption, I think.
Yeah.
Because the raw speed of AI outputs frequently tricks organizations into thinking they're engaged in generative learning.
Oh, because it's doing things so fast.
Right. And AI can generate a 50-page market analysis in 10 seconds. That's incredibly fast. But speed is fundamentally distinct from understanding. The critical missing component is human interpretation.
Okay, I see the tension there, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
It's like, okay, think about the current AI rush as giving a teenager the keys to an incredibly fast, ridiculous sports car. That's the AI tool.
A terrifying thought, but yes.
Right, but you never actually teach them how to read road signs or anticipate danger, which is the human judgment part.
Exactly.
But wait, isn't getting faster the whole point of AI? If an organization forces its teams to slow down and manually interpret every single output the AI produces, aren't they basically negating the very efficiency they just paid millions of dollars for? Why slow down to interpret?
Because without friction, you just have unmanaged acceleration.
Unmanaged acceleration.
Right. Think about the nature of the outputs these models produce. They're probabilistic. They generate what statistically sounds correct based on their training data.
Right. They're guessing the next best word, essentially.
Yes. So the human layer is the only mechanism in the entire system capable of pausing to ask, is this output actually grounded in our specific reality?
Does it make sense for us?
Right. What invisible assumptions are baked into this strategic recommendation? And most importantly, what is the risk if we just act on this without verifying it? If you remove the friction of human interpretation, you aren't driving the company forward. You're just arriving at terrible decisions much faster.
Man, arriving at terrible decisions much faster.
Yeah.
Unmanaged acceleration is a terrifying concept for a business because it means you're institutionalizing a system that scales your blind spots.
Exactly.
So we clearly need a concrete way to hit the brakes and build that judgment systematically. And this directly leads to the playbook's specific framework for doing exactly that, the LAIR Framework.
Yes, LAIR.
Right, which stands for Literacy, Application, Interpretation, and Responsibility. And it's presented as this strict sequence, right?
It absolutely has to be a sequence, because skipping any single step in the LAIR framework triggers a very specific, predictable organizational failure.
Let's walk through those failures.
Sure. So let's look at the mechanics. If a company focuses on literacy without application, they just end up with mere awareness.
So employees understand what a large language model is conceptually. Maybe they sat through a keynote about it.
Right, but they aren't actually utilizing it to solve real business problems.
Which is essentially just an academic exercise. The company gets zero return on its investment.
Exactly. But the second failure state is far more dangerous, I think. Application without interpretation.
What happens there?
That results in blind dependence. You have employees actively using the AI. They're generating code, writing vendor contracts, drafting financial summaries, but they're just accepting the output at face value.
They're bypassing the critical analysis entirely.
They're trusting the machine blindly.
Which leads directly to the third failure state, which is interpretation without responsibility. Now, I find this one fascinating because on the surface, it actually looks like productive work.
It does. People are in Slack channels critiquing the AI.
Right. They're pointing out hallucinations in the data, or they're complaining that the code it generates is super buggy.
But it's just commentary.
Exactly. Nobody actually owns the mandate to correct the workflow or, update the prompts library or make a final decision. It's a culture of observation rather than action.
And finally, if you establish responsibility without institutional support, you create an unsustainable individual burden.
Oh, I've seen this happen.
Right. You end up with one highly conscientious mid-level manager trying to manually audit hundreds of AI-generated reports all on their own.
Just drowning in work.
Because the company hasn't built any formal structures or policies to support that governance. They're fighting the tide alone.
Okay, let me push back on the very first step of that sequence, though. Literacy.
Okay.
Because in a corporate context, literacy usually just means, mandatory HR compliance training, right? Employees click through a slideshow, take a quick 5-question quiz, and get back to work. If we're trying to build deep generative learning, how is this version of literacy fundamentally different from the software rollouts we just criticized?
That's a great question. True AI literacy is not about interface training.
Okay.
It's not teaching someone how to write a basic prompt or which drop-down menu to click. It's about building a shared cognitive framework across the entire organization.
A shared framework.
Right. It means every employee actually understands the probabilistic nature of the technology. They understand its boundaries, like where it excels at synthesizing unstructured data and where it's highly prone to confident fabrication.
So it's about knowing how the tool actually thinks.
Yes. It's establishing a unified vocabulary for discussing risk. Because without that shared baseline understanding of how the machine operates, you can never expect an employee to effectively reach the final stage of the LAIR framework, which is taking real responsibility for the output.
Okay, so LR provides this great sequence for a single person to build reliable judgment. But, an organization isn't just a collection of individuals acting in isolation.
Not a successful one anyway.
Right. And we all know the scenario where one brilliant analyst develops this incredibly efficient, responsible AI workflow, but they just keep it to themselves.
The silo effect.
Yeah. And the rest of the department continues doing things the old, slow way. How does a company ensure that one person's application successfully becomes a whole company's responsibility? How does that individual spark actually scale?
That transition from individual spark to organizational muscle is arguably the hardest part of building a true learning organization.
I believe it.
So to address this, the playbook integrates the 4I framework, which was developed by organizational researchers Crossan, Lane, and White.
Okay, the 4I framework.
Right. They map the precise progression of how knowledge actually travels through a corporate structure. The 4 stages are intuiting, interpreting, integrating, and institutionalizing.
Here's where it gets really interesting because I want to use an analogy to ground this. Think of the 4I process like an indie band making music.
Oh, I like this.
So, intuiting happens at the individual level. It's like the lead singer coming up with a raw melody in their bedroom at 2 a.m. In a corporate setting, let's say a senior logistics coordinator is staring at a chaotic mess of international shipping manifests. They have a sudden intuition. Hey, an AI model could parse these formats and standardize our supply chain.
Right. That's a brilliant spark. But right now, just like that melody, it only exists in their head.
Exactly.
And if they just build a tool for themselves, the organization learns nothing. So they have to move to the second stage, interpreting.
So in the band analogy, this is where they take that melody to the band and explain it.
Yes. The individual makes their intuition explicit to their immediate team. They explain the pattern they noticed, they demonstrate the prompt they used, and they start a real dialogue about how it might function beyond just their own desk.
Which naturally flows into integrating.
Right.
This is the band actually jamming. They're playing the song, figuring out the bass line, testing what works. In the office, the logistics group starts running historical manifests through the AI.
And they discover edge cases where the AI completely misinterprets things, like customs declarations.
Right, they find the flaws.
So they refine the process, coordinate their actions, and figure out exactly where human oversight is absolutely mandatory. They're building a localized, functional system.
And then the final stage, institutionalizing, is where leadership steps in. Back to the band, this is recording the song, producing it, and getting it on the radio so it's repeatable without losing the magic that made it good in the first place.
Exactly. The organization recognizes that this localized logistics system works brilliantly. So they extract it from that specific team and embed it into the company's formal architecture.
It becomes official.
It becomes standard operating procedure. It's baked into the onboarding curriculum for new hires. The company has officially absorbed the learning.
That progression makes so much sense. But wait, this brings up a potential flaw. I mean, a rather alarming vulnerability, really.
What's that?
Well, if a company successfully institutionalizes these AI workflows deeply into their daily routines, aren't they also permanently embedding the AI's hidden biases and flaws straight into their corporate DNA? Like if the AI has a structural blind spot regarding how it evaluates risk and you institutionalize it, you've just institutionalized that blind spot across thousands of employees.
Yes. And you are hitting on the most profound systemic risk discussed in the playbook.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. To unpack this, we look at the work of researcher F. Kramer, who studies educational AI. Kramer issues this stark warning that organizations ignore at their own peril. AI systems are not neutral tools.
They aren't just calculators.
No, they're not passive calculators simply crunching numbers. They carry incredibly deep, invisible assumptions programmed into them by their creators.
Like what kind of assumptions?
Assumptions about what constitutes valid knowledge, what transparency should look like, and how human behavior ought to be categorized and measured.
Wow. So it fundamentally changes the dynamic. You aren't just using a tool to shape your work. The tool is subtly shaping your organization.
Yes. The technology essentially dictates what your organization notices and what it ignores. It reshapes what gets rewarded.
That's wild.
To counter this, the playbook introduces the concept of knowledge-aware learning, which is heavily explored by Shia and colleagues. And this relies on schema theory.
Schema theory, okay.
Right. In cognitive psychology, schema theory posits that humans don't learn by just absorbing isolated facts. We process everything through mental structures or schemas, which are basically maps built from our prior experiences.
So when you encounter a new problem, you connect it to what you already know.
Exactly. When an employee encounters a complex problem, they rely on their schema to know what to do.
Let me trace the logic here then. If you just drop a powerful generative AI into an organization without any guidance, every single employee is forced to rely on their own isolated individual schema to figure out if the AI's output is valid or if it's biased.
Which is a recipe for chaos.
Total chaos. What the organization actually needs is to actively build shared schemas.
Yes.
Like explicit company-wide frameworks, decision rules, approved use cases, risk categories. So employees aren't forced to improvise all alone. Those shared schemas give everyone a collective map to navigate the AI safely.
That is the exact mechanism.
Hmm.
Without those shared organizational schemas, your workforce is basically entirely defenseless against the subtle homogenizing effects of the algorithm.
They have no collective baseline.
Right. They have no way to evaluate when the AI is quietly overriding the company's established values or strategic nuances.
Which leads to a scenario that should honestly keep executives awake at night. So if an AI quietly rewards a certain type of writing or analysis because it's computationally easier to process, does the whole company unknowingly change its entire culture just to appease the algorithm?
That's the fear.
I mean, do analysts stop writing nuanced, dissenting opinions simply because the AI summaries always strip that nuance out anyway?
And that is the precise homogenization Kramer warns about. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a slow erosion of cognitive diversity. And it's exactly why a true learning organization doesn't just reject AI out of fear of these hidden risks.
They can't just ban it.
No. Instead, they systematically bring those algorithmic risks into the light. They make them discussable, observable, and governable. They use their shared schemas to continually audit the machine.
Okay, that is a brilliant theoretical defense, but identifying these deep systemic risks, I mean, that's somewhat terrifying for a leader.
It is daunting.
If you're a leader, how do you actually ground these high-level theories into daily actions? How do you protect your organization on a random Tuesday afternoon?
Well, the playbook grounds all of this theory by translating it into practical dimensions of organizational life, specifically drawing on Surratt's work.
Okay.
It distills everything into 5 very concrete daily operating habits.
Let's hear them.
Habit 1 is building that shared language we discussed earlier, giving people the precise vocabulary to talk about AI limits. Habit 2 is connecting AI strictly to real workflows, not just abstract demos.
Right. Don't show an auditor how an AI can write a poem about a spreadsheet. Show them how to use it to detect anomalies in an expense report.
Exactly. Habit 3 is making interpretation visible, literally showing what was checked, changed, or questioned. Habit 4 is creating feedback loops. And habit 5 is assigning clear responsibility, knowing exactly who approves, who reviews, and who owns the final decision.
I want to zoom in on habit 3 for a second, making interpretation visible, because when I was reading through the source material, this struck me as the most counterintuitive yet absolutely brilliant strategy in the entire playbook.
Oh, it really is a game changer.
Right, because in standard corporate culture, employees are usually incentivized to show how much friction they eliminated. They want to show the boss how fast they completed a task. But this habit demands the exact opposite.
It forces friction.
Yes. It forces employees to explicitly document what they didn't trust about the AI's output. They have to show their work. What data points did they fact check? What assumptions did they flag as biased? What did they manually rewrite? It intentionally shifts the goal from blind acceptance to active critique.
And by doing that, you fundamentally rewrite the psychological contract between the employee and the technology.
Wow, yeah.
You're no longer evaluated on how quickly you can prompt the machine. You're evaluated on the quality of your critique. And when leadership enforces these 5 habits, it completely changes the overarching mandate.
Right.
The real leadership question isn't, how do we train our people to use AI?
Right.
It becomes, what kind of learning organization are we becoming because AI is now part of the work? AI will simply expose whether the organization actually knows how to learn.
Man. So what does this all mean? We started by examining the trap of the software rollout, the illusion that just buying an AI platform equates to building capability. We walked through the LAIR framework to see how missing interpretation and responsibility leads to these massive cascading failures.
Yep.
We explored how the 4I framework moves a localized spark of intuition into institutional muscle. And we confronted the reality that AI is a non-neutral actor. It can quietly rewrite your company's culture if it isn't governed by strong, shared human schemas.
A lot to navigate.
It is. But the core takeaway from the Learning Organization Playbook is clear. The future belongs to organizations that learn better because of AI, not just those who adopt it the fastest. AI readiness isn't about software at all. It's about building a fortress of human judgment, interpretation, and responsibility.
Absolutely.
So if you're listening to this right now, take a hard look at your own team or your own workflow. Ask yourself, are your people stuck in the application phase just using the tool blindly? Or are they moving toward responsibility, actively critiquing and governing the output?
And as you evaluate that maturity, I'd like to leave you with one final, almost existential paradox to chew on.
Oh, let's hear it.
We discussed how a healthy organization uses the 4I framework to institutionalize AI workflows, right?
Great.
But imagine a future where we become so incredibly efficient at institutionalizing AI that the algorithms eventually take over the intuiting and interpreting phases entirely,
Oh, wow.
spotting the patterns and drafting the strategies before a human ever touches them. If that happens, does the human organization eventually atrophy?
Do we forget how to learn?
Exactly. If we continually outsource the raw spark of intuition and the heavy lifting of interpretation to the machine, do we effectively outsource the very essence of being a learning organization to the AI itself?
Wow, that is a profound and slightly terrifying challenge for any leader to navigate. We'll leave you to ponder that one. Until next time, keep digging deeper.